Now that we have access to this animator and its cool system, let's see what it can do and see if it can maybe handle our jumping and some other things for us. So we're going to go back to the animator window. If you don't remember how to find that, just go select your player, find the animator, and then go double click on the controller. That'll bring up the animator window, which allows us to modify an animator controller. And what we want to do is add a jump animation into this canvas and a way to switch back and forth between it. Now, if we go look at our jump, let's go select the player and then click on the sprite so that our project view shows us all of our sprites. There's only one sprite for jump, so it's not much of an animation, but we could theoretically have a player that's a 3D character or a 2D character with better animations that has some jumping going on, or better animations, but actually like moving, jumping animations. We're not going to have one for this character, but we're going to create an animation anyway. To do that, we're going to select our character with our animation window open here. We're going to click the drop down here that says player walk and choose create new clip. We want to create a jump animation, and I want to do that in my jump folder. So I'll go up to the assets folder. Oops, I can click right, and then go to my animation folder, and I'm going to call this player jump. Now in this player jump, we're going to add a single frame that's going to be my alien blue jump. I'll click and drag that over to my animator right at the beginning and choose sprite renderer. And now I've got an animation that just plays a single frame. You haven't seen it yet, but we're going to see it in action in just a moment. Also notice up here in the animator controller, we have a player jump option. This has appeared automatically as soon as we created the animation because it knows that this is an animation for our character. I'm going to click on it and drag it so that it's directly below the player walk, just so that it's nicely lined up. Position doesn't really matter, but having it nice and clean I think is important. And then we're going to go over to this layers and parameters section. We're going to click on parameters and we're going to add in a new parameter. What we want to do is switch between these states depending on whether or not our player is grounded, just like we were doing in our code, but we're going to do it in the animator instead. We'll click on the plus and choose that we want a Boolean parameter or a bool, and we'll name it is grounded, exactly the same way that we did in code with a capital I and a capital G, no spaces. So we've got an is grounded parameter, and then we're going to want to use that parameter to switch back and forth between these two states. So to do that, we'll go to the player walk. We're going to right click on it and hit make transition. That's going to give us an arrow that we can drag around and snap onto anything here. Well, really the only options are exit and player jump that we could snap to, but if we had more things, we could snap to them. We're going to go to player jump and click. We'll get a nice line going straight down to player jump. Then we're going to click on that. This is called a transition, and it transitions between one animation to another. So we're going to click on it, and we're going to add a condition here. If I hit the preview here, you can kind of see it. It doesn't really show very well, but you can kind of see what it's doing. It goes into this animation for this part of the transition. It tries to kind of blur them. So we don't want that blur really happening. We want it to be instant. So we're going to uncheck has exit time, and then we're going to check the condition because we only want this to happen when is grounded is, well, not true, but when it's false. So we'll click the false, click the drop down and choose false. So when we're not grounded, we'll go into the player jump animation. Now we also want to be able to go back into the walk animation when we are grounded. So we're going to go to the player jump animation right here, right click, hit make transition, drag this arrow, and of course you probably guessed, put it right onto the player walk. Then we'll click on the transition for going up to player walk. This not this one, but this one over here to the right. And we're going to add a condition for this as well. Is grounded is equal to true. It kind of default got it because that was our only option. Also uncheck the has exit time. If you don't do that, you're going to see a delay between your animations. It's going to feel weird and laggy like it's not working. All right, we'll save. Go into our code now and start hooking this up. So, well, actually, before we go into our code, let's take our animator and let's drag it down here next to the animation window so that we can see it. And I'll use the right mouse or the middle mouse button to pan this around. And then let's press the play button. Let's just kind of manually control this for a moment before we tell code to do something with it. So we'll play, and we should be able to, if our player is selected, see this animation kind of in progress, or see the animator and get a kind of a preview of what it's doing. So you can see it's playing the player jump animation constantly. If I jump, then it's not switching. So what's going on here? The transition out isn't working. Why is the transition out of player jump not working? Oh, because is grounded's never changing. So that was the problem. I forgot this is exactly what we're looking at. So is grounded changing will switch between our two different animations, either constantly in player jump or in player walk if they're grounded. So how are we going to set this from code? Well, let's go back over to our player script. So select the player, open up the script, and in our update sprite, instead of changing the sprite between our default sprite and our jump sprite, let's delete that code. We'll take lines 60 through line 63, hit delete, and we'll say get component, and we'll get our animator, and we're going to set a parameter on it, a Boolean parameter specifically. So we'll do set bool, and we need our open parentheses. Then we have to give it the name of the Boolean, which is grounded, capital I and capital G. And then we got to go to the end of that quotation mark, add a comma, and pass in the value, which is either going to be true or false, which is our is grounded. Now, that alone, with the semicolon at the end, will control passing in that is grounded state to check or to match whatever our game state is or our player state is, and have our animation update. Let's go try it out. So I've saved, got rid of the star. We'll jump back in. We're going to leave the animator window showing here and the game window over here on the left. And then when we jump, you should see that is grounded becomes unchecked. It switches animations, and when we land, it switches back. Let's try that out. Looking good. So we've got two animation types. We're going from jump to walk, and so far, I think this is looking pretty nice. All right, let's stop playing. And let's add in one more state. Let's say we want to have an idle state where we're not moving at all. We're going to go to our animation in our project view again. We're going to create one more animation. So first I'll go find our idle sprite, which is the alien blue front. I'll go to project view, click on this sprite right here so it gets selected. And then we'll go create a new animation. So on our animation, again with the player selected, hit create new clip. We'll choose player idle as the name, and I want to make sure that I put this into my animations folder as well. And save. So we've got a player idle animation. We'll take the idle sprite or the front sprite, where's that at? And drag it right out onto here. So we have a single instance or a single sprite animation. Drop that to sprite renderer. And then we'll go back to our animator controller, and look at that, we've got the player idle option. I'm going to take this and drag it up. Let's say right over to the, let's go over here to the left, just to the left of player jump and player walk. And what I want to do now is make a transition between player walk and player idle based on how fast my player is moving or whether or not my player is moving. So we're going to need another parameter like a is moving or a speed. What I'd like to add is a horizontal speed. So let's add a new float. We'll hit plus. Call this horizontal speed or horizontal velocity. We could call it either one, but we need to be consistent with it. I'm going to call it horizontal speed. We're going to make a transition from player walk, right click, make transition down to player idle, and then we'll make a condition on that. So select that transition here, and we'll add a condition that the speed is greater than or less than 0.1. So if it's less than 0.1, then we're probably not moving. We're going to stop. If we get that value greater than 0.1 or greater than 0, though, I want to move back into walking. So we're going to add another transition from idle, or right-click, hit Make Transition, go back to Player Walk, click on that transition, and add the condition that the horizontal speed is greater than 0. So just choose horizontal speed, and greater than 0 is the default. I'm going to uncheck has exit time on both of these transitions. I don't want any blending happening. And then we'll save our scene off. The last thing we need to do is modify this horizontal speed from code. Now, if you remember what our code looks like, this should seem relatively simple, but let's go take a look, and maybe we'll have this be a little challenge. So in our update sprite method, what should we do to keep that speed or get that speed into here? I want you to think about it for a moment, see if you can figure it out, and then go ahead and write the code. If you can't figure it out, don't worry, I'm going to show you in just a second. So go ahead and see if you can figure that out. And let's go through the results. So it's actually relatively simple. What we need to do is set a float on the animator. I'm going to take line 60. I'm going to duplicate it with Command or Control D. We're going to change set bool to set float. We'll change the variable name to horizontal speed. and we'll change the value that we pass in to be our underscore horizontal. This should work alone. Now we might want to cache our animator. We probably should. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for now, this is good enough and this should work. It should update our animator. Let's go try it out. Jump back into Unity. I expect now that when we're not moving, we stand still. And when we are moving, we start to play our walk animation. Let's check. So there we are. We're not moving. We don't play an animation. We are moving. We play an animation. Oh. But only when we're moving to the right. So if we move to the left, it doesn't work. Look at that. So how are we going to fix this? Well, there's one thing that we can do. And well, first let's talk about why this is happening. Look at that horizontal speed variable. It's -3. -3 is less than 0.1, so it's probably not going to work. Now, there are a couple ways that we could change this. We could go in here and modify the condition. We could add in a way to maybe add in some condition. Well, we really can't even add in a condition. Say like it's greater than 3 and less than 0 or something weird. But really what we want to do is just have it be not negative in here so that we never get a negative value. We always get the positive representation of that, or the absolute value of our number, which is just the number without the negative sign. So to do that, we can make one simple code change. We'll go back to our player script, and right here where we pass in the horizontal, we'll pass in math.abs. And then add in an open parentheses, and then add a closing parentheses at the end of the horizontal. So what this is going to do is give us the absolute value of the horizontal and pass that in. It's essentially saying if there's a minus in front of it, remove the minus and just use that value to pass in. That's all the absolute value is really doing. So math.abs or math.absolute is what it's doing. All right, let's jump back into Unity. We should now be able to see our animation working if we go left, right, jump, or well, just about anything else. Let's see. So we play. We go to the left, we're animating. We go to the right, we're animating. And if we jump, let's see. There we go, we're animating as well. Now, one issue that we have is that we don't go from idle into jump. Notice this. If we're not moving, we're not walking, we don't make a transition from the idle state into the jump state. And that's because we only have transitions from walk into jump. So we're going to need to add in transitions from idle into jump as well. So we'll right click on idle, hit make a transition over to jump, and we want to select this condition. Notice that it's going through them automatically because we don't have a condition anymore. We want to add a condition here that is grounded is equal to false. And then we want to make a transition back out of here into player idle and set the condition that is grounded is equal to true and horizontal speed is less than 0.1. So we only want to go back to idle if we're not moving. So let's try that out. Now I can jump, I can walk, and I can jump and walk. And it's, for the most part, looking pretty good. There's one little issue when I switch states where the speed, I think, gets a little bit weird that I don't like. But we'll talk about how we're going to address that in a moment, where you kind of get that like quick face to the front for a quarter or tenth of a second or so. But this is looking good, and notice that we were able to modify our animator when we were playing. I'm going to show that specifically because the animator is not in our scene. The animator is part of the project. If I go down here and select the controller, it's actually this asset down here that we've modified. And while you can't modify scene assets or scene placed things at runtime and have that stay, you can do that with project level things, which can be confusing and sometimes cause problems because sometimes people think that it's not going to save because it's on something they got to through the scene view and pulled up, but it's actually a project level thing. So the animator changes did save even though we did them while we were playing. So let's go back into Plastic SCM and say that we've added animator controls for walk and idle. Yeah. Well, it's really jump and idle. And check in. Oh, and if you get this error, just like I said before, just hit check in again. It happens. It pops up every now and then.